Others. Morning, everyone. So good morning, everyone. That's much better. Thank you very much. My name is Heidi van Rooyen. I'm the Executive Director of a program called Human and Social Development at the HSRC. So thank you very much for all attending here this morning. We are competing with another fairly similar event. The government has a policy review on the National Action Plan to combat racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. And that white paper discussion is, as it were, happening in TV today. So what are the chances of that? 2 minutes. So I could become a rap artist, and I didn't even know I had to do that. So saying welcome. I said that we were competing with another event, a white paper policy review on the National Action Plan to combat racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. And that's happening today in PE. So I'll say, what are the chances of that? 2 events on a fairly similar topic in the same space. So, East London. Thanks. There's lots of little helpers around. But thank you very much, guys, for turning up today and for joining us for this very important discussion. I'm going to say a few words of introduction before I hand over to our moderator and our panel. So I think hardly a week goes by without a racist incident finding its way to our social media pages. These incidents, as well as student protests in the past year, have highlighted several things for us. I think firstly highlighted persistent racial tensions in our country. Perhaps they reveal the truth about residual anger and racism in present-day South Africa. And I think importantly, they remind us of how much we still have to do to attain that elusive rainbow we set our sights on as a nation in 1994. These events have collectively also given us pause at the HSRC, urging us to contribute to the public and intellectual discourse on racial inequality and racism through this series of public dialogues. Our objectives for these dialogues are as follows: to try and contribute constructively to the public debate on reconciliation, poverty and inequality, and racism in post-apartheid South Africa, to create a space in which these issues can be discussed and debated with a greater degree of depth that's not always possible on our social media pages, even though we think we are being very different and profound when we do so, to share our knowledge and scholarship in these areas, and I think importantly to allow different voices to be heard, with a view to bringing about change with regard to racial inequalities and racism in our country. And so to achieve these objectives, we've put together a series of 4 panel discussions to discuss this really broad theme: racial inequalities and racism in South Africa, history, mechanisms, and ideas for change. We've done 3 so far: in Pretoria, Cape Town, and Durban, and this is the 4th and final one in Port Elizabeth. Each of these events focus on a discrete set of questions, really aimed at deepening the discussion and hopefully informing action. We see these 4 dialogues, as one long overarching conversation, each one informing and shaping the next one. The one in dialogue, the one in Durban, which we've recently had, focused on racial inequalities and racism, visions and ideas to change. And several key issues were raised at this particular debate, which I want to just touch on now as a way of informing our discussion as we move forward this morning. The debate in Durban was intense, lively, and emotional at times. I think we were challenged by the panel and the audience to consider that 20-odd years later, this idea of black and white in these very extreme states, this pure black and white structure of privilege and oppression, was becoming fractured. That privilege was deracializing, and that inequalities between and in groups were expanding. Secondly, a really important point that was raised was that racism is not simply the discriminatory or prejudicial attitudes we hold. But racism provides a very important function. It provides a way through which we make sense of ourselves and others, a way through which we give our lives meaning. And to get past racism, we have to find ways of undoing these everyday ways of being, these everyday ways of seeing and doing race. Point 3 is where things started to get really heated in the debate and the discussion. And the panel felt that rainbowism, the rainbow nation, was the greatest lie sold to all of us post-1994. There was disagreement about the way the South African struggle has been, in inverted commas, Mandela-fied. Some felt Mandela was a sellout. Others thought this was insulting in the extreme. I think most agree that the revolution is not over. The revolution, redistribution is really not over. It was never properly negotiated nor completed by political elites working for a democratic South Africa at the time. Fourthly, commitment to concepts such as non-racialism and multiculturalism were questioned. The panel felt that commitment to these concepts without proper decolonization in the first place leads to racial denialism and renders us silent on issues of structural change and real transformation. Most felt that our work as we move forward in this country must happen at the level of structural and systemic forces that drive racial inequalities. I think the panel also challenged us to do better in thinking about the way that structural inequalities continue in the form of everyday violence of the poor and the disenfranchised in this country. And so examples around these were South African corporations colluding to fix bread prices, viewing townships as pools of black labor, the violence of poor black people having to get up daily at 3 a.m. in order to catch multiple modes of transportation to and from their places of work. So these kinds of everyday violences that the poor experience that we need to be looking at and challenging and questioning. The panel also debated whether the problem of racism and racial inequality could be solved by simply wiping out class privilege. This came up often in discussion. And there was a lot of debate about whether we could simply solve all of our problems around racism by simply wiping out class privilege. There was also much debate on how this should be done. The strongest voices were that we live in a violent society, that colonialism violently removed land from indigenous people, and so the way to restore things should be through other violent means. The feeling was almost 2 decades of doing it the non-violent, the feeling was that almost 2 decades later of doing things in predominantly the non-violent way, with no signs of meaningful progress. The time had come back to take back white privilege. So not all were in agreement with this position. Others felt that while this revolution should continue, it should do so through slow resistance and peaceful struggle, by focusing on other things, on love and not more hate, by looking to individual, everyday small actions of undoing racism in our workplaces, in our homes, and that the revolution will occur in these thousands of small everyday actions. So these kinds of positions have come up often in these debates, these two sets of broad issues we have to be looking at, a broader structural and systemic level, but also coming back to the much more personal, everyday way in which we all do race. And I think as you engage in the discussion today, those two themes will come up again, and we ask you to engage with both of those sets of issues. So in this final debate, having looked at the history of racism and what keeps inequalities in place, and considering visions for change, we move today to focusing on the effects of racism and racial inequalities and the interventions that have worked. To address this today, we'll explore the following 3 questions. How does racial inequality affect our society, including structures and institutions? How does racism affect people's lives in terms of their mental, physical, and psychological health? And what are some of the projects and practices that have sought to overcome racism and to date? So, if I could very briefly turn your attention to the program to make an apology for Dr. Zetu Matudeni, who should have been with us today from UCT. PE has great coffee, but fewer flights in and out from PE to other metropoles. So we struggled to get a connecting flight back to Cape Town at 5 o'clock. She had a lecture that she couldn't get on. So really sorry she couldn't join us, but we have a wonderful panel of 4. We are grateful and could make the event. Please follow us, the discussion on Twitter, tweet about it. You can do so via an HSRCZA, and you can use the hashtags, hashtag racism dialogues and hashtag racism. That's all on your particular program. So my little stint is over for the next few minutes. I'm going to briefly introduce you to John Pullman, who's going to moderate our dialogue. John is a well-recognized print, radio, and TV journalist. He's received numerous awards for this work. He currently hosts Today with John Pullman on Fire FM, and I was delighted to know that he will do it this afternoon from Algoa FM. So he'll be kind of doing this. Isn't that cool? I'm a bit like old with that. Probably it's not so cool. And every day, but I was excited that John will do his radio show this afternoon from Radio Angola. Many of you will remember him as the long-standing host of AM Live on SAFM. John is a particularly accomplished debate facilitator and has chaired a number of public debates, including with politicians, bless his soul, business leaders, and various other stakeholders. Besides news and actuality, he's also a well-known soccer commentator, and you may not know this, but he's the founder of the Dreamsfield Project, which raises funds to support the game in township and rural schools. John, I'm going to hand over to you. Please let's welcome John and our family.
Thanks very much, Heidi. I'd like to welcome you all to what I hope will be a very uncomfortable 2 hours. The reason I say uncomfortable is because it is uncomfortable. Heidi talked about the things that have burst into prominence in social media, but I think the conversation today is going to be about the things that don't make it into social media, about the everyday indignities and difficulties that people face as a result of our history, as a result as well, though, of our unresolved present. We've done some amazing things as a country, but I was chatting to Professor Sudin a bit earlier, and as uncomfortable as some of our conflicts are, in many ways I'm less uncomfortable with those than I are with the lament that some people have. Why can't we have 1994 elections again? Why can't we have the 95 Rugby World Cup again? Why can't we have the 2010 Football World Cup again? We're out of miracles, I think. Whatever your spiritual belief framework is, I think you'd have to agree that that great being, him or her, has given this country more than enough of those miracles. Now we have the hard work and the difficult task of resolving these all-important things that we're here to discuss. So I wish you all an uncomfortable but highly productive 2 hours. By the way, that does tend to be when we as South Africans are at our best, when we're facing the wall perhaps a little bit more closely than when it's obscured by a rose-filled garden. Roses die, by the way, they're seasonal. So without further ado, let's get into introducing our panel. I was going to do it in alphabetical order, but this time I'm going to go backwards. So our first speaker, each of them will have 5 minutes, by the way, and then we'll give you a chance to interact and we'll let it unfold over the 2 hours that we have. Tabang Quinch is Community Engagement and Research Coordinator at the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy. It's part of the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. We're delighted to have Tabang. Over to you. Share some thoughts and experience.
Thank you, John. A very good morning to everyone. It is such an honor and a privilege to be part of these discussions. As John has alluded and that these are uncomfortable discussions. I am of the belief that it is, again, out of discomfort that we can make a sense of the kinds of uncertainties and the complexities that we are confronted with. So we have to navigate through these uncomfortable spaces sometimes. My introduction to the discussion would be first to give a very brief, schematic picture of the nature of racism in South Africa historically and how it has manifested itself over the years and how it has shifted and changed over time, whilst at the very same time the inequalities still remain intact. If we go back, with the advent of colonialism in South Africa, we have witnessed how state orchestrated form of racism in South Africa has been fully entrenched and systematized to all aspects of human existence. I am going to use an analogy here, which I'm going to borrow from the model of Louis Althusser when he speaks about ideological state apparatuses, which has been, I believe, the main instrument that apartheid racism has used over the years. I'm actually going to look at it at 2 different levels. At first, I am going to look at it from a horizontal level, and at the very same time, I'm going to look at it from a vertical level. Sorry for that. I'm going to look at it from two different levels. First, the vertical and then the horizontal level. You have a state with all its policies and practices which are imposed through other forms, such as repressive state apparatuses, through the kinds of machineries that the state has used. It has also used ideological state apparatuses again, where you have how institutions such as family, education, church, etc., have been used to further perpetuate the very same ideology of apartheid racism. I'm going to shift a little bit from that analogy and move forward to the present. We can see now how the vestiges of racism are very hard to deal with because they have infiltrated all aspects of human existence. Because all aspects of human life have been involved in terms of how it was institutionalized. What then becomes more challenging even further is how we as citizens have normalized some of the instruments that have been used to further entrench racism. The notion of race, for example, has become normalized without us even problematizing it. Scientists have argued over the years that there is no ecological or scientific explanation of the existence of race. Yet still, as citizens, we still operate as if race is something tangible, something that we can see. It is again the very same processes that have fully entrenched and normalized these kinds of thinking in society. It is again my argument that even if the state has been an instrument in institutionalizing racism, but to deal with racism requires more than just state intervention to deal with it, because we have to adopt different mechanisms which are now responding to the imposition of this phenomenon of racism. Why am I arguing that we have to adopt different strategies in dealing with racism, not just to rely on the state? Because I don't believe that the state itself is sufficient to deal with this phenomenon of racism. Maybe at some point later on, I will expatiate and explicate more on that in terms of why am I arguing that it requires a deeper level of intervention other than just intervention.
Great, Taban, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Tulani Madinginye. He's co-founder of the organization Real Talk, which creates spaces for people to talk, like this one. Over to you, Tulani.
I find it a lot easier to read than to think. So I've just written down what I was going to say after this first 5 minutes. When I received the invitation to be part of this panel, I already missed it because I thought it was just another spam destined email, to be honest. And it took a call from a friend who is not here today, South Dakota, for me to read the email. One day I'll figure out why I didn't think, because the invitation to sit in the panel. When I did read it, my natural gut inclination was to discuss it with my wife. And when we spoke about it, we agreed that it was a wonderful opportunity to plant seeds, and I would share the hope our grand nieces will one day sit. The question was, what seeds should we plant today? Planting seeds, by definition, requires casting an eye to the future. So it meant we needed to dream, the two of us. Being South African and loving the country, we thought to dream of a future South Africa. We asked ourselves what kind of South Africa we want a child born in 2020 to inherit when they turn 25 in 2045, the year which we will turn 60. Because seeds require soil to be tilled, fertilizer put in, regularly watered, and weeds to be removed in order for them to grow, we also asked ourselves what work needs to be done for the South Africa we dream of to be realized. Let me start off by painting the picture of our dream and then detailing what work we think is required to be able to achieve that dream. The first thing we realized, and that became evidently and abundantly and painfully obvious for us while we tried to do this exercise, was that dreaming was not easy. It is quite a difficult thing to do, but we did attempt it. And so I want to tell you about the story of the 25-year-old Thabang Ayanda Tibetando. The Thabang was a complete mistake. 25-year-old. So the year is 2045. Thabang, with a double-barrel surname, Tibetando, the child of a Venda father and a colored Afrikaner mother, just turned 25. The 25-year-old just graduated from MU, Mpumalanga University, with a master's in computer engineering. MU is one of 6 universities built in South Africa between 2020 and 2025, all of which are currently in the top 200 universities in the world. Thabang cannot decide whether to do a PhD or move to the city of Mthatha, where the now 5-year-old business started at the beginning of 3rd year is growing quite fast. Designing the software for the business was hard, but was made a lot easier by the availability of both government and private funding for innovation. Thabang grew up in Kimberley, where economic growth has been underpinned by the growing beneficiation industry in that city. Diamonds from all over the world are cut there, and the jewelry and industrial diamond business has been very strong. When Thabang first went to primary school in 2027, there were 1.8 million other children around the world who also started school that year. They were the first group to go to school after every government school in the country finally got a library, a computer lab, at least 2 science labs, sporting facilities for all the major sports in schools, and schools knocked off at 5 o'clock. Every one of the 1.8 million had been in early child development education facilities and no older than 2 years of age. They were also greatly helped by the agreement reached between government and the teachers' unions to keep teachers accountable to excellence and innovation. When they finally matriculated, only 1% had been held back at some point or another. They all had basic maths, computer coding, and had studied at least 3 of the official languages at the first language level. Thabang speaks, reads, and writes Venda, Afrikaans, English, and Xhosa at a native speaker level. Having friends who speak those languages in school and in the neighborhood helped a great deal in practicing those languages. When asked about the history of South Africa, Thabang believes that the government-citizen partnership has gone a long way in righting the wrongs of the past. And though more needs to be done to achieve equality of the genders, languages, and races, boy has the South African culture come a long way. As they were taught throughout school, working hard, working together, and working for one another is the true mark of a South African. That's why absolute poverty is a thing of the past, a thing of the old South Africa. So the question my wife and I asked ourselves was, how can we build South Africa? Apartheid was not an accident. It was a gigantic mistake, but it was not an accident. Apartheid was a detailed plan that was brilliantly executed, and as a result achieved a lot of its goals. Division between tribes, establishing white superiority in the South African psyche, eradicating the Afrikaner poor problem, and creating a white economic elite, to name but just 4. The only way to effectively reverse the bad things that apartheid aimed for and achieved is to develop an equally or more detailed plan and execute it excellently to counter its effects. What would the objectives of such a plan be? The top 3 that we thought of: integration of all South Africans along tribal, racial, and economic lines, establishing the equal value of every human being in the psyche of South Africans, eradicating all poverty and creating a middle-income majority. The development of such a plan requires a deep understanding of what the apartheid plan entails. Its details must include the most effective antidotes to apartheid, as well as the best ways to achieve the new objectives. The plan must be all-encompassing. It must involve spatial development, infrastructure, education, culture, racial, individual responsibility, psychology, among others. Executing such a plan will require new social contracts between citizens and the government. And the only way the goals can be achieved is if we all work hard, work together, and work for one another. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tulani Madinginie. Our next speaker, Thabang Keswe, Senior Legal Officer of the South African Human Rights Commission. Thabang, over to you.
Thank you very much. Let me also take this opportunity to thank the HSRC for the invitation for us to be part of this important discussion. I will talk more into the experiences as the human rights commission and ways, systems in place that we seek to find directly places in the world we will be able to manage to do that. We find that there's much that was left unattended when our democracy was founded. We have, as a country, managed to acquire certain freedoms. You can say political freedoms, but we still battling with economic freedoms, and we still battling with issues of racism. Racism in 22 years into democracy is now really starting to manifest its active face and somehow still, showing how divided the country still is. The government over the years has, by all means, enacted a number of legislation to try to simply some of these things are related and managed, but we have not talked about racism and inequalities in our country. And I would like to take a different direction, approach on us still referring to it as sensitive or uncomfortable. We need to start moving to the direction of when we start talking about it openly and removing the idea that it's sensitive. Because when you say it's sensitive, it's uncomfortable, that's what makes people not to talk about it. We need to have, it's a good thing that we're having these kind of dialogues. The Department on our side is working on dialogues with recent action plan. We need more of this, that where we talk about it. We define, we explain that yes, we are different in our diversity, but we are equal. The ideas like the rainbow nation that we say are features that South Africa belongs to all. We need to talk more about that so that we get rid of the ideas that other is superior than the other. We need to work on talking more about it. We need this kind of dialogues to go to the actual community. It's a good enough that we discuss this at this level of stakeholders, analysts from different stakeholder organizations, the community organizations, but we need to go to the people actually. Start thinking about it. It's the people out there who feel to talk about it. As the Human Rights Commission, we receive complaints on a daily basis of racial discriminations where people fear to talk about this, perhaps because maybe they fear victimization or whatever kind of consequences that you may suffer as a result of people coming up. On a daily basis, we see how it affects society, how it affects our people emotionally, psychologically, it affects our people. We, on a regular basis, work on representing people in the court of law who have gone through these experiences, and people are really scared to talk about it. The government has tried to come up with dedicated courts that deal with racism matters, equality courts. They call it equality courts. They are not utilized. People do not know about it. So as time goes on this discussion, I'll be emphasizing more of talking openly and more education, educating people of ways in which to approach the issues of racism. Because another issue that I will be raising as we go on with this is that it has become evident that South Africans do not know this so well, placed constitution of our ordinary South Africans do not know the constitution. It's us here who are well educated and but people don't know. We need to talk more. We need to start and have discussions.
Thank you very much. Finally, Melissa Tando Bongela is a writer, editor, and filmmaker. She's currently arts editor at the Mail and Guardian. She also collaborates on various social impact initiatives, one of them with the feminist Stockfell. Melissa Tando, over to you.
Hi,
Opening thoughts.
hi everybody. I'm going to echo Taran's word and say I am definitely not comfortable and uncomfortable with what you're doing. This is my favorite subject. When I got the invitation, I was like, yes, finally it's time to come and to discuss this thing. I would like to swear. I get very passionate and sometimes I'm inclined to use expletives. I hope it's not going to offend anyone. It's just the way I like to express myself. Yeah, it's very difficult to prepare for such a subject because it's so vast. It is something that is part of the air we breathe in South Africa. And so it's kind of difficult to dissect and say, oh, let's put this topic here today. But inevitably, that is going to affect all the other parts of the conversation. And, you know, if people will be inspired to say things. I cannot wait to hear what people have to say regarding the subject because finally we have the time to think about this in our country. For the first 20 years of our democracy, first 18, 19, 20 years of our democracy, none of us could say anything. We all had to kind of get on this bandwagon of everything's fine, everyone, nothing to see here. Well, we're fine. World Cup, 95 soccer, everything, let's get together, nothing's wrong. After 400 plus years of constant rape and pillaging and abuse and violence and all kinds of unspeakable crimes on a people, we cannot expect people to say, oh, there's nothing to see here. We love Mandela as a country. The world loves him. But white people love him the absolute most. Why? Because of the opportunity and that is why, unfortunately, the rest of us also got caught on the bandwagon of, yes, we do love this man. And what he was able to do for us as a country. But for a long time, we couldn't speak about the bad stuff. We couldn't talk about the fact that actually Mandela, as great as you were, why is it that when you came out of jail, the people that hated you the most, put you in jail, are the ones that love you the most? Now, and have the power and the media and the capacity to tell the whole world how great you are. I feel like after he died, we were able to get a chance to breathe and say, okay, let's really talk about the rules here. We haven't touched him, we haven't said anything, and now we have an opportunity to really get to the bottom line. I feel like as a country, we all want the same thing. We all have this beautiful nation, this future that we're creating for ourselves, that we all are desperate to get to. However, we don't have the tools, and these kinds of conversations and get-togethers are a way of kind of building tools to heal emotionally and psychologically, and also as well as economically, effectively. My focus on this is I really want to talk about the psychosis of racism on Black people, and on white people, on Indian people, on colored people, on all the other ethnicities and races in between the strata. Three things. Despite the color of this panel, sorry, despite the color of this problem, I do not believe that racism is a Black people's problem. Black people did not create racism, we did not invent it, we did not put signs up everywhere in South Africa that says Europeans here, Black here. We didn't do any of that, and yet I find that recently it has become our problem to solve this. And I wish there was a white person on this panel, so that we could have a conversation to say, okay, as a white person, how do you feel? Because when I got on the plane yesterday, I was like, please God, don't let it be another kind of way. It's just Black people sitting and the white audience is mostly white, and we are teaching and we're doing the labor again of trying to solve this thing that we did not create. This is a conversation that South Africans equally have to have together. White people have to say, no, these are my problems with this thing, and Black people say, these are our problems with these kinds of things. So that it's not again another era of us doing the work for people and other people's backs and saying it's going to be okay. There's been enough of that. Part of the reason why I feel crazy as a human being every single day is because we live in a third space as Black people. There's the one, or WD, the word called a double consciousness, where you live with yourself on one hand, and on the other, you also live as a Black person, which is, the rest of it is a construct. But in post-apartheid South Africa, there's a third space that actually has developed, whereby on one hand you have your true self, where you can be comfortable with people that you know and love, and on the other, you have the pressure to put on for white people at work, in public spaces. The place that when you can't really say anything that you feel, you have to have fake smiles. You have to kind of really invent this other persona in order to survive, really. Not for any other reason, but to survive in a country where white people are in power from, anywhere, really. And that makes me really feel crazy, because you can't really say the things you want to say, otherwise you lose your job, someone might slap you in a restaurant, so you might run you over, it's offensive, you could be in jail, there's all kinds of things. And so living in that space and trying to navigate it on a daily basis is an extra layer of psychology and work that you have to do. And it's not just for black people, it's also for white people. A lot of my white friends, two that I have actually, my friends say they also have a difficult time trying to navigate the space of what does it mean to be a white South African in South Africa? How do you deal with this thing called whiteness? What is it? How do I walk around as the person that I want to be, but as a person who cannot escape the social passport that is my skin color and what it means? And I always say to people, we all want to get to the same destination, but we have to stay on two different roads. My role as a black person is to survive racism, is to rehabilitate myself and other black people from the destruction of racism, and white people have to figure it out. 400, luckily in these 400 years, black people have been writing theories and trying to understand this thing. This is the one thing where we have a head start on white people. We have got ways of trying to understand what this thing is, and white South Africans need to do the same. They need to get together and create their own versions of Steve Biko, their own versions of Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela, so that they can heal from within, so that this thing will stop becoming a one-sided problem and it can become a white problem, a problem where white people feel like, I don't have to be quiet when it's time to discuss racism because I don't want to offend people, or I've been told that I'm not supposed to speak, I'm only supposed to listen. There are many places where white people get together on their own, climber clubs, restaurants, baby showers, all kinds of organizations where there's hardly any black people, where those spaces could be used for real social transformation. And it takes one thing. We have all the black people. A few hours. But the one thing that I that needs to happen before this kind of psychological unpack can do is self-reflection. Being black by default in this world is self-reflection. You are constantly forced to examine yourself, the ways or being oppressed. As a woman, you're constantly forced to examine your gender. What white people need to do is self-reflect. Is think of ways of how we're going to, accept and undo this thing, so that we can start to find genuine, sincere ways of getting over this thing, of unwriting ourselves.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, now if people want to join in, please indicate, put your hand up. We've got two people with microphones, and they'll be moving around. We'll take some questions from the floor in a moment, but I want to start with you perhaps and ask you this. Melissa Tando was saying, we're all heading in the same direction, we need to stick to our lanes. I haven't clarified what you said. And what your view on that is, because your role, and I don't know much about your organization, is to create spaces for conversation. Do you share that view, that after the conversation, get back in your lane?
I suppose the answer is no, but I don't think it's that simple. I think that there is work that needs to be done in different places. So I think that if you want to create a South African culture, you need everybody to be involved in the creation of that culture. So South African identity, you need everybody to be involved in that process. But at the same time, in the same way that I can go and call my sister out if she's doing something wrong, and she understands that it's from a loving place as a brother, but I could never go and call out one brother just because I don't have a relationship with him. I think that it's generally things in the races. So I think that's the work of black people to go and call black people out and things that they might be doing wrong or that they think they're doing wrong, so that they can get better in that corner, as much as it is the function of white people to call white people out on racism and the things that they're doing wrong in that corner. But we do need to create a space where we're all coming together to work towards holding the future of that.
And if I could ask you, Tabang, to respond to Tabang, who said that we have our political freedoms, but we don't need to have our economic freedoms. And I wonder about the absoluteness of that split. I mean, do you think South Africans yet have political freedoms? Was there work to be done there? Is it as linear, perhaps, as Tabang number 2 put it?
It's a very nice, challenging question. My response to that would be modes of operation do not operate in the forms. They are very intricate by their very nature, very complex. You cannot isolate one form from you cannot compartmentalize freelance and say, okay, this is one aspect, which is not linked from the other freedoms. So if we are to come back to the issue that you raised, what is our understanding of democracy? That's one point of view. My understanding is that the kind of democratization that is needed in this country is not the kind of democracy that would operate in ways that excludes certain sections of society. I don't believe that we can ever reach that ideal.
But how far are we from that idea? I mean, I think that's in essence is my question, because we could easily, in perhaps a celebratory and but some people might say too quickly, self-congratulatory way, so as we often hear, we have a constitution that is the envy of the world, and therefore that constitution, by definition, the world must work. Whereas the other people who feel that our constitution actually prevents the resolution of issues like the land question. So how far are we away from not perfection, but a practical application of political rights for in your view?
There are always moments of progression. There are always moments of retrogression in our journey towards that ideal. Part of the problem that we are confronted with is we have always, throughout, modernism, we have always argued along the lines that certain struggles should be raised by the class, one class that. But we have seen that it has never worked anywhere.
Yes.
The same argument we can argue strongly today and say there is no exclusion of certain sections of society when we are looking at this kind of very complex, and intricate forms of oppression. For example, can we then argue and say women should have their own, struggles of origin themselves in their own struggles without necessarily looking at other segments of society?
Yeah.
So,
okay. So,
Okay, short response to that.
Yeah.
I think it's the world we live in, it's difficult, if not impossible, to exercise political right without economic freedom. And so, if you still have 75% of the country making less than 4,000 rand and 50% living on 639 rand a month, how do you get a lawyer to go to court and challenge someone in the right that you want to achieve? I think that the truth cannot be divorced, and you can't ask the question of the one without them.
So, Barbara, I want to come back to you and ask you this about the South African Human Rights Commission. You talk about the regular flow of people who come to you who at least transcended one of the fear barriers to try and make a case. Is your sense that most of your organization's work in the fight against racism is defensive, in the sense that it's mainly trying to deal with wrongs that have already been done? Or is there a component of what you're doing that you feel is actually creating new space, creating new ground, and pushing out the boundaries? Is there preventive work, or is it largely curative?
It's really now largely curative. Because you're dealing with problems that are already there that you are trying to resolve, other than having to do the work of perhaps talking or educating people of this racial inequalities. So largely what we find ourselves doing now is curing the racial incidents that are very
So can I ask you this then as a follow-up? What would change that? Because I think anyone involved in medicine would say that if all you do is curative, you'll never be able to solve the problem because the root causes keep reinforcing. Do you think that raises questions about that and perhaps other Chapter 9 institutions, but specifically yours, on the issue of racism, that maybe something else has to be done other than patching?
Now, we have acknowledged the fact that as much as we are a Chapter 9 institution and it's our institutional mandate to educate people of their rights and the Constitution, as I said, that we noticed that South Africans do not know. It should be a collaborative effort. It cannot be the duty of one institution to talk and educate people more of this. So it has to be a collaborative effort with other Chapter 9 institutions and other stakeholders to see that we talk more and educate people. Then in that way, we will not find ourselves in institutions.
Anyone out there wants to ask a question? Can it, if you do, please raise your hand high. I thought, so I asked if you wanted to ask a question. The person next to you said you didn't, that you were scratching your ear. Do you want to raise your hand? We'll get a microphone to you now. But Melissa Tando, a response to what you said at one point in your presentation about Black people are far ahead in dealing with this issue of racism. Tell us why you're so sure of that applies equally to everybody, given the degree of psychological damage that's been done alongside material deprivation and legal abuse and so on. Is there not hard work for Black people to do as well?
There's an immense, almost uncannibal struggle for all of us to do. However, I'm saying, as people who have suffered from racism, there is a lot of work that has been done by Black people around the world in terms of defining what racism is, in terms of understanding what it is and how it functions on an everyday basis in people's lives, how it functions on an institutional basis in people's lives. And so there is a library of written work, of music, of all kinds of cultural elements and tools that we could use to say, okay, if I'm somebody who does not understand what racism is, I can walk into a library and read a litany of authors. That's what I'm saying. As Black people, there is a body of work that we have produced that people can go through. And I was saying that as white people in South Africa and around the world do not have the same kind of thing. I'm not saying that on an individual basis, I'm voting like so, of course I'm automatically get it. No. I was oppressed and limited by racism for 29 years. But in the last 2 years, I've managed to turn my whole entire life around because of that body knowledge. That's what I meant. But in terms of the work that as individuals we all have to do, absolutely. Racism oppressed all of us, whether we were white or we were Black. So it takes a lot of work, individually, culturally, families, schools, all our institutions in our country have to find ways in order to undo what was done to all of us, no matter where you stand on the social hierarchy of racism. That's what I mean. It's not something that you can wake up and start to think and say, oh no, I'm not Peter Sparrow. Oh no, I'm not Sahiro. Oh no, I'm not so and so. So I don't have to not do the work. Every single one of us has to do the work. And then different lane thing is we have different positions to occupy within the lanes or within a road of getting somewhere because we did not all suffer racism in the same way. Some of us had superiority conflicts and others had an inferiority conflict. That's what I mean.
Okay, great, thanks. Ma'am, when you get a microphone, please tell us who you are and then fire away and join the conversation. Yes, over to you, man.
Thank you very much. I'm by no means an expert on these issues, and I might just find it difficult to express myself, but I hope I manage to. Being a South African, born and bred here, raised by parents who grew up in the apartheid regime, I've observed and experienced that in our country we seem to have uh, uh, two forms of racism, and maybe I'm narrowing it too much. Uh, Whereby you've got a group or a sector of society that would have unintended racism, which would be a group of people who have suffered, you know, racism or who grew up in the apartheid regime. And I'm thinking of a person like my father. Like, for him, it's almost unintended. He would just have a certain perception of white people because he was jailed twice for being at the wrong place at the wrong time. He didn't have a job pass, and therefore he shouldn't have been there. So to him, you know, a white person is that kind of person. Not that he basically, and please just pardon me because I don't know how to express this, but I don't think it's a matter of hatred, but it's a matter of what he has experienced. And, you know, I walked down the beach with him, he said 25 days ago I was not allowed to walk here. And the question is, how do you know, assist, educate, and remove or let people capitalize on those kind of deep emotional, rooted, unattended things which end up like making them to be racist, um, not deliberate. And then you've got racism that is well intended, that is intended, which is the one that I think Taban referred to, where you have systems in place that were aimed at making sure that the minority benefit versus the majority and stuff like that, which is a different form. But my biggest concern is because I think oftentimes we deal with the planned type of racism. We say, okay, let's reverse, you know, hierarchies. Let's offer opportunities for everyone and so on. We deal with the systemic type racism, but we leave out the, I don't know what to call it, this kind of unintended racism that people are bottling up and they just hate certain people because certain things were done to them and they are never being addressed. And I believe that we are a human race. In fact, it's not a matter of belief, it's a fact. We are a human race. And as a human race, we need to deal with these issues in a collective manner if we are to make progress on this issue, while at the same time acknowledging the different lenses that people.
Can I ask you a question, Ruben? And I mean, I don't know your father, but why should it be your father's responsibility to deal with his anger? Because maybe part of that responsibility, and I don't mean it necessarily literally, should fall to the policeman who arrested him unfairly and whoever else did him wrong. I'm just wondering why the bill is your dad's.
You know, yes, I think it's a collective effort that needs to be put together to address this. But from the psychological point of view, I think it doesn't help either, you know, to keep pointing a finger and I mean, I walked 4 kilometers to school, no water, no toilet myself. But you've got to come to a stage where you say, look, there were good things that made me who I am today, and basically stop living the past. So we have an individual responsibility, but yes, of course, it will help if the environment around us is conducive, to make that growth happen.
Thank you. I mean, there's a lot that Refuwe is raising. I'll give it to the panel. Can we just give the indication of anyone else who wants to speak? I like to move the microphones quickly. Get your hands up high. We'll get a microphone to you. There we go. We've got one over there. There's somebody else over there. His hand went up and then went down. We'll get a mic to you in a minute. Does anyone want to respond to Refuwe? Because I think she's raised lots of issues. Tabang, do you want to go first?
Yes,
It's like everyone wants to respond.
I want
So well done.
to comment on just one issue that she raised of the depth of the inequalities and the racism into our people. Ladies and gentlemen, let's acknowledge and accept that we are only at the beginning. Oppression, racial inequalities in our country have been there for hundreds of years. We are only beginning. In fact, we now realize that we have to talk about it more only 22 years after we have founded our democracy. Now we have another 22 years to talk, just to talk. I mean, countries that have had their democracy for centuries, like the US, still face issues of racial tensions coming, and even now. Who are we? We only have 20 years, 20 years. So it's work in progress. We understand the depth in which most people who were living in the previous era of apartheid, the depth of the scope. But talking more about it, making them realize that other than just the complexion or the color of the skin, there's a difference. There is one who is superior than the other. So we need to talk more, and we need to agree and accept now, while we are at the beginning, that it's going to take decades for us to reach that.
You, Melissa Tanda, also want to respond to Refuwe?
Yes. The first thing I thought when you were speaking about your father and said that it's one form of racism was that I disagree that it's racism. I think that your father was rightly and justly reacting to the human rights abuses that were visited upon his body by a very violent system. And there are many other similar cases that people are going through in South Africa where the burden is on the victim to not be angry and to not react to being kicked and pushed and shoved and sworn at and spat at. Because again, we don't have an atmosphere where we're allowed to be angry, we're not allowed to react, we're just being told to keep quiet when the issue is still going on in many ways every single day. So I don't think that your father is racist. Is the racist. I think he's the anti racism. Also because he doesn't have the power to be racist. If he had the power to be racist, then he would do something about it, something that we would likely know about. However, all most of our people do is as people say, sit in toilets and swear at the fact that, oh no, this 10-year-old boy has just called me a boy and I'm a grown man, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I think that he's suffering from the psychosis of being growing up in a deeply racist society. And as a nation, we do need to find ways to address that. I believe that there should be racist anonymous officers in every single corner of our country, where we can all walk in and have your father talk to somebody and have a white person who has an issue too, come in, an Indian person, a colored person, where we can all come in and find ways to plug and matrix to plug in to say, okay, this is how we're going to deal with it. And we don't have those. So it's not racism at all.
Thanks. I think one of the biggest problems with racism is that we don't see it for what it was originally intended to be. Right? So, and then this might be a problem with history books being wrong, but the first time the term white and black are used to refer to races is essentially the landed class trying to divide the unlanded class so that they don't unite and kind of come together against them, right? And so, and even in apartheid, ultimately racism is used for economic means. Right? So you are 1912 Land Act, you're taking away, you're giving 13% of the population 87% of the land because you want the white race to dominate agriculture and to force the black race to move into cities in order to provide cheap labor to the system. Okay. And all the other things kind of come with it to just pop up that system. But the point I'm saying is that racism at its best, and even through apartheid, is a very effective process of social engineering. And our response to the very well-structured process of social engineering is let's sit down and talk about it. I think it's insufficient. I think that we need a better, more detailed approach to reversing the social engineering and engineering something new, something different. And so, I mean, that's a great idea. I've never thought about it in my life, but Racist Anonymous could be part of that social plan. Racist Anonymous. But we need to find ways to create a South African who doesn't have those scars, and in fact begins to see the next South African as equal, as valued as contributing towards this grand story. And we just haven't taken it.
Okay, let's go back to the floor. So you have a microphone, give us your name and give us your thoughts.
Hi, I'm Gary Kokomo. Various things. The one thing I wanted to just reflect on is that the Stats SA published recently visual maps of the census data done in 2011 for all cities across South Africa. In terms of racial segregation, Nelson Mandela Bay tops the list, the top list. And the second city is Cape Town. And what strikes me is that we have an ANC-led government in Nelson Mandela Bay, and they have not been able to solve it. You know, if you believe the DA and everything that the DA says, they are unable to solve it. And I'm just, you know, there were some questions there about the deep-seated nature of this thing that we face and whether we really are seeing the right stuff. I mean, I don't think we can have a better constitution, better courts than anywhere else in the world. Yet we seem not to be able to get to the core. And I was just wondering from the panelists' view, what is the core? Because we seem to be very comfortable in our spaces. We are comfortable in our races. You know, so it's uncomfortable to talk about it, but we are very comfortable in our spaces. We like living together as white people, with black people, with other people, and that kind of stuff. Is that something that we're going to discuss and ask ourselves?
Okay, thanks. And if you could just pass the microphone back to the people who are moving the microphones. Ma'am, you wanted to join in, tell us who you are, and let's hear from you.
Hi, my name is Patrice. I'm the Director of the South African National Peace Project. I don't think that the struggle against racism can be separated from these things. I've been working with schools and youth and adults for the past 6 years, and I've seen the change that comes through education. We're talking about only probably new South African new generation, but I firmly believe while this dialogue and these kind of mechanisms have a role to play, I think we should actually go back to the drawing board a bit and just restructure this, because, and this is my humble opinion, I think we should start at the very base of, I think we should start in the schools with children.
Doing what?
Teaching peace.
What is that? What is that?
This project is a response to violence and racial hatred. Building peace is the way to ensure that peace would last. And when I look at the results and the outcomes of the project, you have children changing their ways and their approach to each other and to their own lives. I've worked in Sunnyside Primary School, where in 3 months the project directly impacted on the violence and bullying and the racism, which dropped by 72%. So it's just my humble opinion that I think we should separate the work we do here and start working also in these environments with the children on a much larger basis. I work in 3 problem provinces at the moment. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Did anyone else put up their hand? We've still got a microphone if someone wants to use it. No? Okay. So, Taban, maybe you want to respond to Gary's point about persistence of segregation. How do you understand that? Is it simply choice, or are there much deeper factors that we need to look at?
From my own young input, I know from the premise of giving an analysis of how structure or institutional forms of racism operates with different mechanisms being put into place to further treat ritual it will take more than just a government of the for undo years of racial oppression. It will take us maybe another lifetime of generation to realize the kind of a vision of society that we created. But that kind of society starts now, today, by us introducing the different levels, multiplicities of interventions, not only rely on government as paternalistic and invest more energies for state intervention. That it is only through state intervention that problems of racial oppression and inequalities can be addressed. My understanding is at different levels of human existence, there lies pockets of what I call there is conscience in each and every subject, human subject, what I call conscience. It is not a preserved monopoly of a particular racialized group. There is conscience in all of us. It is that conscience that is the regulator of human practice and human action. We all know that racism is unjust. But because of our institutionalization of the years, we have taken it as a norm that we have to think along racialized lines.
Can I ask you a question? In response to what you just said, because you said we all know that racism is unjust. If that were true, does that nevertheless have any force if people don't agree on what racism is? Isn't that at the heart of the conflictual conversation that we're having in this? So I agree with you completely. I mean, as South Africans, we readily agree on things, the definition of which we actually contest.
I wouldn't be waging any struggle if I was having this very cynical and pessimistic approach that we do not have that force in each and every human subject. There is that kind of importance. Because ultimately, what drives our struggles is the hope for a vision of a society which we envisage, which we believe it is possible to achieve. After all, I wouldn't be anti-racist. Why would I be anti-racist if I do not believe that it is possible? Why would I be anti-racist if I believe that certain groups of people have this ingrained, racialized thinking, which is a result of nature, which is nature, or it is nature as a black person, to be anti-racist, for example. Because I wouldn't be anti-racist if I believe that certain groups of people do not have that deeply implanted in them, that conscience, which I call conscience, is the regulator of human action and human activity.
So, Bang, you want to comment?
Yes, I want to say, or just take a very brave position on what David is raising, based on my observations. One is the let's talk. Nelson Mandela, nature of this area. You see, you are faced with a huge volume of complaints coming from. In fact, 90% of complaints from the Eastern Cape that come to human rights commission come from this project about this area. Now, that raises a lot of where there is more of South Africans different, there seems to be less talk with each other. You do not want to share space with each other. You don't want to live.
Is Nelson Mandela, just for clarification, is it, for example, worse than Johannesburg, which obviously is the largest city, but would have a similar, both demographic mix, racial mix, but also a similar history of where people live and why? I'm just wondering, is this place particularly bad?
Well, in this context, where I'm operating, my space is the West. But obviously, one from that side will go Canada. But I'm talking about this space. When I look on the side of, you talk about the former trust, you hardly find any kind of this thing. So I'm taking, that's why I'm saying I'm taking a very brave position to say there seems to be no tolerance with each other on this side of problems, and that needs to be worked. I just wanted to, before it goes off my head, respond to the lady here who raised the issue of schools. I want to make a comment that it's a good thing. We want to, embark on that. We want to teach our children at school level to live together with each other and basically, own differences. But the seed seems to be from the homeland. It comes from home. Now, if you teach a child at school of about peace and living together in harmony and non-racialism, what happens when the child goes home and they are taught that because I'm saying this, just a few days ago, we received a complaint from the Church Council where children of ages 6, 7, 8 were exchanging words between themselves, others calling us all those sorts of names, monkeys and all that. When the parents came in and fueled, it got to a level where those approached the Human Rights Commission. Now you see that this actually is more rooted, it's educated. People are educated in the house, at home.
But before I come back to the panel on this, any other indications of people who want to join in? Or please get your hands up, we'll get microphones to you. We've got someone at the front, we've got someone in 2 rows from the front over here. Minister Tando, I'd like your view on a number of things, but that all wrap around, I guess, the point that Patrice was introducing, working with children. Often we hear people saying, we heard it just now on the panel, it will take another generation, but in fact we've had another generation already. And I want your view on whether it necessarily means that young people who get given different ideas are going to find themselves in a better space as young adults where, to be blunt, things start getting a lot more competitive and the competition for resources begins the minute you get that matric certificate. But your thoughts on that? Working with young people, but then what? Where does it go next?
think that that was the idea founders, founders of this new nation thought would solve our problems. Oh no, we were the ones that experienced this thing firsthand. We were the ones that were beaten and told all kinds of things. I'm pretty sure the next generation is going to have a different experience. And yes, in the beginning it worked. When we were little, it was okay. When we finally had Jenny and whoever. Even though at times, they would tell us, oh no, maybe you can come to my house, but I'm not going to your house. I'm not allowed to come to your house. Or you're sitting in a classroom, you're all getting along, you're painting, you're cleaning your hands with these children, and somebody says, oh, God left you guys with the island. That's why you're so glad. And God took us out of time. And we loved the class because that's all we knew what to do with it. We got racialized there. And so those kinds of things happen. These are not stories that I'm making up. These are the kinds of things that happen in those safe spaces that our nation, our fathers, our mothers, the church, everyone was trying to create for us. And this is why it is the class that was not meant to turn around and speak racism, that is turning around and saying, decolonize. You must recognize. Because at the end of it, we realize that racism is much bigger than me and you. It's much bigger than people in this room coming together saying, let's work hard and try to solve this thing. It's an institutional problem. It is tougher than the walls, but unfortunately, it's not about the institution. We all talk about racism because it's a system, it is a system, but we all talk about it as a system, not a system that was built and maintained and named and financed by human beings. Again, I'm going to come back to the point of we need to break open and crack open the truth about racism. People started it. It's not about who started it. It's name and shame, so that we can heal at the end of it. And again, the biggest problem is that, just like what I was saying, just to also respond to your point then about the schools, you can teach children in the school, but who is teaching them? And when they go back home, who is teaching people that they call others mighty, to call others names and fingers and capitals and all those things? Those words have the historical context of those words, and until the people who made up those words, the people who have held those systems for so long, decide that actually we don't want to do this anymore, when the children are thinking different things, they're going to come out and then different things and act different things in the society. And so you will start to see other facets of placement start to change. So institutionally, the universities will change what they're teaching and not make it Eurocentric and actually centralize Africa. The financial institutions will stop sending their money offshore and actually start to do something about it. It won't be a matter of, oh, I'm a white person, it's my job to show people I'm not racist, to let me adopt a black child, or let me marry a black person. That's not going to stop racism. Racism is going to be undone exactly the same way that it was done. And so it's a combination of things. It's definitely education by us in public spaces, but also it's on an individual basis. What are you going to do about it from your perspective? Because as a black person, I can sit and write books and do all kinds of things about how much I want to end it and get together with many white friends. All of us have a good intention to end it. But if my white friend is not going back home to the dinner table where I'm not present, and they're talking to their uncle and their father and their grandmother and saying, actually, Dad, what are you going to do about this farm? What are you going to do about the land? You are the CEO of such and such a company. How do you handle that in your place of work? What are you doing to ensure that there's not an intergenerational and a form of oppression that's going to last for another 100 years? That's what it takes. It's not about whether you're good, you're bad. It's not about us. It's not about the, how good we are as individuals, because we were all told something false about the way we look. And unless we let go of those falsities and those lies, forget about it.
Okay, just before we take some more questions, I'm not going to give anyone a second chance until I've given anyone a first chance, if you don't mind, just to be fair on that. I'm very mindful that we've got about 45 minutes left here, but also very mindful that this is the last HSRC debate. So I'm going to ask everybody just to focus as much as they can on what do we do about it? What do we do about it? Because I think as we talk about what we do about it and we push and we shove and we disagree, I think we'll uncover new things about what it is that we're trying to fix. But I'm going to just ask that of the panel to come strongly on what you think works. Talking about it is important, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But clearly we need to do more. And I think Minister Tando has driven us particularly on issues of how we talk about it and with whom and where. But can we be very future orientated, rooted very much in the present? Who's got a microphone? Yes, go ahead, ma'am. Tell us who you are and tell us what you do.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Tanya, and I'm white. I just wanted to say something about the integration of the cities. The same study from STATSA indicates very clearly that Johannesburg is the most integrated city in South Africa. So we need to learn something about Joburg. But I think historically, it's been integrated. There were pockets of resistance within the city of Johannesburg in the past. Rocky Street, Hillbrow, where people got together and listened to jazz, etc. But the point that I actually wanted to make is, what do I do? What do I do to convince my black friends, my black colleagues, that I respect everybody's human dignity, but I'm still part of a group I'm deeply ashamed of, and I recognize my privilege. What do I do? Do I just live with the guilt? Do I enter into one uncomfortable conversation after another? It is a very, very important question, because my mentor in life was a very, very strong older black woman, and she chose me to mentor, and I felt very privileged by that. And so why are we not interacting in those complex ways in South Africa? Why are we just saying, you're white, I'm black, you're racist, I'm not? And what do we do about it? I cannot change the color of my skin, and you cannot change the color of your skin. But how do we find our common humanity whilst at the same time addressing this awful monster that we live with in the country, and it's escalating? The issues of racism are escalating.
Can I ask you a quick question? And I want to share one tiny thought. You've asked a lot of questions. Have you answered it for yourself?
I don't know what the answers are. No.
I
That's
don't-
why I'm asking.
I don't
questions.
mean chapter and verse answers, but I mean, if you come up with some small answers.
Well, relationships matter a lot. So in every situation, whether work or home, I think the way in which we communicate with one another, the way in which we respect one another, but genuinely. Then again, somebody would say, don't smile at me because I know you're just being decent. I don't, you know what I mean? So very, very difficult. I think interpersonal relationships are essential. Getting to know one another, understanding one another's cultures, learning new languages, but they're not easy answers.
Yes, I just have one tiny thing to share. The Germans who reflected on their history drew a distinction between guilt and responsibility. And I'm not going to go into that because it's not my platform, but I think it's a really interesting thing to explore. Guilt tends to end in tears and recrimination and is often not genuine. But responsibility is a whole other thing. And I'd like to see that in another conversation. Ma'am, over to you.
I'm Everyday from the HSRC. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'd like to thank the panel for their contributions so far. The wheels are turning, but as John prompted, I wanted to move towards workable ideas, towards change. So, Taban, you're speaking a lot about needing different mechanisms to respond to contemporary mutations of racism, and needing to adopt different strategies. So can we start to name these? Um, Tulani, you started to speak about the really beautiful, imaginative crafting of the South Africa we want to live in. You know, you articulated the meticulousness of apartheid and needing to be equally meticulous in our engineering of it. What does this involve? What does this mean? What's the value chain? What is the link? Who needs to be in communication with whom? Who needs to connect with whom? And then Amelia, you spoke about not really having tools to deal with racism broadly as a country, but the kinds of tools that you adopted yourself, which I really like. You know, I like what you mentioned, the literary works and the music and the art that's influenced you, because importantly, these things teach us pedagogy, they teach us history, they teach us anthropology. So I guess what I'm saying is I'd like to hear more about the work you do in your spaces and the way you heal yourselves, and what you see working out there. For you, Taban, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like a lot of the work you do is in response. What outreach work do you do with the human transformation? What engagement work do you do?
Okay, great, thanks. Anyone else who had a hand up didn't get a mic? Yes, we've got someone over there. Was there anyone else? Hands nice and high. Okay. Half a hand. Let's see a big one in a minute. Go ahead, ma'am, and then I'll get it to the.
Hi, good morning. My name is Hannah Kirsten, and I'm from private college, Port Elizabeth College.
Can you say your first name?
Tanya.
Tanya, thanks. Go ahead.
I must say I'm very intrigued and interested in the discussion that's going on here. I'm not a born free. And in the 22 years, I've had very few discussions or heard very few formal discussions like this. So I'm very intrigued and I don't give much pause to think about some of the things that the speakers and the audience have said. So I'm really enjoying this. The only contribution that I would like to make is that I think a lot of the change happened at grassroots levels. You know, you're in this room full of very, very strong intellectual power, people who have thought about these things substantially over a period of time that make strategic changes to the way our society works. But I find that very often things change on the ground in a really simple manner. And I think about the kinds of people that are most affected by racism in our country, probably wouldn't be able to engage in this kind of debate. So I think that simple things like just asking people about things, you know,
Can I ask you a quick question? When you say people would be able to engage in this debate, do you mean that they're not given an opportunity to engage in the debate, or are you saying that they don't construct ideas in this way? I'm not sure why they're unable to engage in the debate. Is it capacity or access?
Well, possibly we don't, because the people that I engage with, me myself, my friends that I have, my family, the people that I work with, we don't often engage in this kind of strategic discussion and debate. But we often do talk about things like why are you getting that to work, or why don't you just go to the doctor if you do have a stomachache? And it's in those kinds of things that we learn more about each other, and it's those kinds of things that I think that draw us a little bit closer to each other, so that causes us to be more sensitive. I think there's a lot of desensitization work that needs to happen, that we just need to engage on perhaps more informal and simpler platforms in order to draw closer to each other.
Thanks very much. Let's take one more before I go back to the panel now. You've got a mic? Welcome.
Good morning. Okay. Thank you so much for organizing this. I felt so disengaged. I went to PE about 4 months ago. I'm from Soweto, Joburg.
And tell us who you are.
Nisakha from
Welcome.
HSRC here.
Yeah.
I'm so all over the place right now, but I'm trying to find the focus. Okay. So building on the idea of racism anonymous and white people being comfortable in their racism, we actually had a discussion about it with some of my colleagues this week. A colleague of mine was looking for a place, and she kept calling, and I'm like, why don't you change your accent? Maybe it's joking around about it, saying that maybe it sounds too black, and maybe they're not responding to your call because you're black. That's a possibility. So when I moved to PE, I kind of struggled to find a place, and then I finally found a place. And in my contract, my landlord put there no slaughtering of animals. So I told my colleague about it, and we had a big laugh about it. But then, I mean, I did ask her, when I read through the contract, like, what is this about? Where did you get this from? She's like, no, from other people who own property, like this issue has come up. And right now, sitting here, I'm feeling so guilty that I did not read that further. I mean, she's a really nice person, and in fact, she's more like a mother to me right now. So I don't think that she's racist. I don't know the line between racism and ignorance, like when it comes to certain white people in my circles. And so my question is, to what degree do we have a responsibility as Black people to point out racism to white people in our circles? And are we, and how do we know for sure? I mean, I don't want to downright say to somebody, that's racist or you've been racist, but I mean, I do want them to start thinking deep about things, their actions, and the things that they say. Like, you not understanding people's, Black people's culture. Like, we don't slaughter at a place where we're renting. So that's close. It's like unnecessary. So yeah. So to what extent do you have that responsibility?
Thank you very much. Okay, what I'm going to do is, there's plenty that's come up from the floor, and I want to give everyone in the panel a chance to respond to whatever bits that they would like to. And then I really want us to spend a bit of time on Alude, if I've got your name correctly. Alude. Alude, I beg your pardon. Alude's point about solutions and keep driving in that direction. Who wants to pick up on what Lesego was raising? Anyone? Yeah?
So can I just start from the lady in front of Mr. Paul, and I'm kind of related
Yeah,
to
move
the
forward.
answer and then I will go.
Wouldn't mind reading Alude's because we'll do a whole round on that. Thanks.
How do I influence? What do I do to convince my Black friends that I'm not racist? That? Was that the gist of the question?
It was far more complicated than that.
Yes,
But
of
you
course.
can reduce it to that.
Can I please reduce it? I mean, I know it was complicated. But I just put that first part because your attention is focused on convincing the Black friends that yes, you understand all of these things that happen in South Africa. Interpersonal relationships are very important to build. I 100% agree with you. But that's why I said that this race thing is not about how good we are as individuals necessarily, even when we are together. It's about the responsibilities that we all have to take as race individuals. All of us in South Africa are racist. We are in a deeply racialized society. So that it will help for all of us to admit that we have a relationship to racism. We're not racist in the same way, but all of us have a relationship to racism. I mentioned the fact that we grew up in a country that had 181 years of slavery, then 102 years of colonialism added to that, and then 26 years of apartheid. So we have a relationship to racism. If I was your friend as a Black person, I would say to you that if you shifted your focus away from what it convince me about the difficulty in the relationship that you have with race, and rather did the much more difficult work of turning that attention into your whiteness and say, yes, you're ashamed of it, yes, there's all these kinds of things, but how are you going to deal with it? Because none of us wants to walk around with that horrible feeling until the day we die. But unfortunately we do. As long as we're still we do have to walk around with a horrible feeling until the day we die. Of trying to live our lives and then every day being distracted by a new way of this, somebody else putting in nothing, somebody else putting in this and this and that. It's a distraction on our side too. So if you took it upon yourself and said, I'm going to make this thing a distraction in my life, but in a positive way, I'm going to get together with my white friends and whoever else that I feel feels the same way as me, and we are going to try and sort this out in our little circle, in our little way, in whatever way we can. We can't solve those problems, but here's what we can do as white people extra on top of what you as an individual are doing in your interpersonal daily relations with the waiter or the kitchen attendant or the person living in your house cleaning for you or your best friend or the woman that's mentoring you. You know what I mean? So it makes practical steps for you to say, as white women, I need to get together with other white women, and we need to create safe spaces where we're able to talk about our problems and say, shame, I protest from that. And B, as a citizen, here's what I can do with my privilege. The financial side of my privilege, which would help, as well as the cultural side of my privilege. So when you see this happening, you're not going to keep quiet. You know what I mean? And thirdly, if we were really good friends, I'd say, well, that's not my problem. And my problem with a black person is to come up with solutions to help other black people, including myself. Because it's not for us to now, on top of all the other shit we have to do with black people, also hold white people can say, yeah, this is how you're going to become a racist. White people have to do the work as well. There is no work that white people have done in South Africa. There was never a group that said, you know what, as the one coalition of churches or whatever, or the Greeks and the Germans and the Jews and the Italians of South Africa, this is what we're going to do. There was none of that. So white people cannot look to us and say, give us something to do. How can you ask us any questions about it? Figure it out. That's the work of racism. I always tell my friends, oh, do something in your family when you're having dinner. Yeah, but no one's going to listen to me. Yeah, but they're going to put me at the kids' table. Well, that's the difficulty of work. I'm pretty sure all the books and knowledge that black people have had also came from. And the fact that we're still having to read these books and convince ourselves that our hair is fine, our skin is fine, that everything is fine about it, on top of the racism that happens, that's a lot to deal with. So that is the difficulty. It's going to be hard. Uncomfortable is a baby word to use. It's going to be difficult. You lose friends, you lose marriages, you get cast out. But if you're truly being cast out, it doesn't want to be cast out. So my advice to you is start these conversations with people where you feel safe, where you're not crying and saying, oh no, we must divert now our attention from what we're doing as black people to help you what you're doing. That's not fair. And then to link, the second question, which is how do we tell people, or is it fair to just say you're racist? Again, this goes back to understanding what racism is, which is a job that we all have to do as South Africans. If you understand that what racism is, how it makes, how it functions, what kind of technology it is, which is technology, then you'll be able to ascertain whether that situation is racist or not. So there's also a lot of work on our part and how to take away the negative voices that tell you that it's not racist from your own head. So it's reading, it's getting together, it's watching documentaries, watching films, having millions of conversations, seeking out the information. It's not going to come to you just sitting and saying, oh, is that racist? What that grandmother did is racist, but she obviously didn't mean well. She meant well. She didn't mean in a bad way. And that's your kind-hearted, humane black person saying that. But it was intentional. I don't want you to have to say a stupid story. That's essentially what it was, but it was putting it in a nice way. So if you have a lexicon, if you understand the language, if you understand the way it functions, then you'll be able to tell very well, very easily, oh, okay, that's racist. And you can go to her with facts, with receipts, and say it's racist in this way, that way, that way, that way.
Jelani, you were keen?
Cool.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I'll kind of go into some order. I'm going to talk about the PK thing as well, just because
I did give you a chance to have your
hand
on that. Go ahead.
The first thing, I'm sorry, I'm not doing it, but the first thing I wrote was you just need to start trying to convince people that you value it. When you value someone, they'll know, and they won't have to ask you. So you need to be your best and most genuine self with everyone. And so what I find the strangest thing is white people becoming patronizing because they're trying to be nice to black people. No one needs it, no one wants it, and it just feels false. So that.
Can I ask you a quick question before we move on? Because you were wrapping there. What you say makes sense when you say if you value someone, they will know. But isn't there a corollary to that? That it does also depend on the person having a sense of their own value. And by the way, that arises in relationships that may not have a racial dimension to them at all. That there's misunderstandings based on how both people value themselves. I'm just throwing that in.
It's a half truth, right? So it's a half truth.
Most truths.
Yeah, like I guess.
Yeah.
I even though I have a particular way of feeling valued, I can almost always tell when the next person does value me, even though they value me in a different way to what I would feel valued. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying the way you treat your son, if you treated me the way you treat your son, believe you me, I will know that you value me, even if I don't particularly like the way you treat your son, right? So that's just something to think about and go about it. Before I go to the piece, sorry, let's say about if it's the all-encompassing nature of racism in this country, right? I say this to prove the point. Every black person in the country has some white person who can completely change the experience of life, and I mean in a meaningful way. So either your boss or your landlord or something who, by a decision they make, they can change it completely how your life goes. And very few, if any, white people have a black person in their lives who can change their lives in a similar way, right? And we live in a country where black people outnumber white people 1 to 9, almost 1 to 9, 1 to 10. It's completely crazy. It's like, why should I have to be worried about slaughtering or not slaughtering? Because it's just weird, right? But I think part of what that means is that you need to be true to yourself, right? So one of the things I try to figure out for myself is, do I really care about that? Like, do I care that you think I'm going to slaughter at your house? It probably depends on whether I'm going to slaughter at your house or not. If I'm not going to slaughter at your house, I don't care. I'll move on. If it's something that matters to me, I'll take that up. At the same time, there are some fights that I think are important for black people at large, right? I almost can never, as a black person, ignore the fact that my actions and non-actions will impact the next black person that has to be in that space or in that position. And so that for me is a point where and I like to ask the question, like just ask questions. Why is this a concern for you is a good question. 2, is there no other way of going about this, whatever the story is? But so it needs to be important to me, firstly. Secondly, it needs to be important for the next black person that comes to that place. That's generally how I try to figure out what to tackle and what not to tackle. P in Cape Town, and this is a big one, right? So I lived in Cape Town for 8 years. And there are kind of 3 things about Cape Town, and I'm assuming they're probably similar about PE, because all my white friends moved to PE, from Cape Town, love PE, right? And yeah, and the only black friend that moved there and liked it had interesting reasons that whatever. So there are 3 things. There's economic opportunity, there's spatial development, and then there's social currency, right? And social currency, I mean clickiness. Okay? So in Cape Town, for example, let me start with the clickiness. In Cape Town, when you introduce yourself to someone, hi, my name is Tulani. If they're Cape Townian, usually the first question they'll ask is, what high school did you go to? So I'm like a 25-year-old whatever at the time, and I'm like, why does this matter that what high school I went to? But what it does in Cape Town is immediately, it does 2 things, right? It classes you. Okay? If you're into Bishops, you're a particular group, and then the second thing is it determines whether I can befriend you or not. Okay? And you'll see it. And so there's a clickiness about the structure of Cape Town, which becomes racialized because of spatial development, right? Because the school I went to will also determine what area I'm from, which will determine what race I am already, right? In a sense. And Cape Town has got that onion structure, right? So it's always better to be in the center of Cape Town, to be right, southern seaboard, whatever it is, that's where you want to live, okay? And because of that structure, well, not because of that structure, but because there aren't economic activities that allow people who would have historically been on the outside to move inside, there's very little opportunity for social interaction between races, because it's very little opportunity for social interaction between economic classes. Okay, and so you get the problems of complete segregation, almost as if people don't want to live together. It's that they just can't. Versus Gauteng, which I juxtapose it to, because Gauteng has forced itself to integrate. Okay, for whatever reason, we just don't have enough space there, and so Gauteng has grown into. So you're in Dainfern, but you have to be next to Deep Split. Okay, it's not. You don't quite have the option to not see black people, right? Even though you still do in a sense. So. But also, Gauteng has created enough economic opportunities for people of different races to move into what would have been the center of Gauteng, forcing some level of interaction. And the phenomenal thing about Gauteng is you go into a restaurant, there'll be different races, but if you look at the tables, they'll all be one race all the time. The key difference is in Cape Town, you go to a restaurant as a black person, and you'll be the only black person in that restaurant. So Gauteng is kind of a couple of steps ahead, but not quite to a place where you have integration.
Okay, are you good on that?
Yeah.
What I want to do, because I'm just mindful of the time, we're wrapping it around 12:15, Article 20. Unless Tabang and Tabang want to respond to Nania and Lesepo's point, can we, do you want to respond to the point they made? Yeah, great.
Response from my side.
Yes.
Thanks. On the issues of intervention, as I alluded before, that basically what countries that can addressing the problem.
I think we're going to do a round in those.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to wrap on the points that Nania and Lesepo made about experience of race and how you engage with it.
Yeah. When I look at the racialized black subject, I'm specifically defining a racialized black subject not as a naturalized subject, but a historical, cultural subject which has been informed by those realities. The question of is it my responsibility to educate others about my lived experiences of oppression? I believe that by us being located at the margin, that provides us a panoramic position of knowing the margin and the center. What do I mean by that? The experiences of being black has meant that we have an understanding and knowledge of oppressed conditions. But at the very same time, those conditions are not homogeneous. I cannot say, I know what it feels to be black better than she does. Because we have different lived experiences of blackness. It is therefore, I believe, because of my advantageous position, which I would say it has been a disadvantage, but an advantage at the very same time, because being located at the margin, you have a much better view of knowing what it is to be privileged and what it is to be oppressed. So hence, I don't feel it being a burden for me to dissect what racism means and how it manifests itself to anyone, including the very same people that I'm assuming or moving from the assumption that they should know because they have the very same experiences. Because I don't believe that we can look at lived experiences in very homogenized ways. Moving again to
I think you've answered the two that we were after.
All right. No, I'll wait until we come
on this particular round, you want to share?
Not much, but I share similar sentiments with my colleagues. Ladies, racism is really that what we do. It does not affect. Whether it comes smoothly or directly, give it that and you need not convince me that you view us in that particular way which will please me. Because when you are yourself, one of our leaders said that love is more natural. So when you are yourself and you conduct yourself in that particular way that is accommodating to everyone can well see. You need not be much convincing that you
Okay, let's go to the question asked about what you are doing and what you think could be done, and what should be done. Let's spend the 15 minutes that we have left talking about solutions. Did you want to carry on?
You know, before it's that,
Yes.
I just have a humble plea to make. She indicated when she started casting the color and what we do and the color of the color. That when we share these ideas of what we do, what we think, right, I would be very much pleased if we can hear from some of our fellow white South Africans to share, you know, so how does it feel to be the white South African? What needs to be done? So as when we share ideas of how do we move forward as a panel here, I hope that we can have that special coming to the floor.
Okay. Do you want to kick off?
Yeah, I can. Human Rights Commission, we are a chapter 9 institution. It's a constitutional mandate in terms of the Constitution as well as the Human Rights Commission Act that we monitor observance of human rights by other state institutions and other people. We promote protection of human rights. It's one of our primary mandates to educate people of human rights. Bill of Rights in the Constitution is very broad and there's quite a lot of rights to them. We need a lot of understanding so as people can know what to do when they are faced with this kind of issue. The protection mandate we do it by being responsive, as I said. As when you receive complaints, you investigate complaints, there's a chapter 9 institution, we make our findings, and we even mitigate. In the past years, we were celebrating 8 years of existence. We have noticed that we have been much more responsive. The position that was taken as a strategic position was to, with the limited resources that we have to shift our focus now on advocacy, on education, on going out to the people back. With the population, for example, of Eastern Cape of just over 6 million, we find ourselves with, as a provincial office, maybe one advocacy and education person who has to go around for teaching. Sometimes it's difficult to reach to certain point. But we are trying to intensify and strengthen that link of our mandate and do more community outreach programs and talk to the people in the ground and teach them about the Constitution and teach them of available or already available new legislation that are not utilized. That's a position that we took, that we do more education so for more legislation.
So, Bama, I don't know if you're able to take your HSRC hat off for a minute to answer this question, but you must come across some incredibly difficult and I would imagine at times dismaying things, the work that comes across your desk. And I wonder if you could or would be able to share with us a moment in the thought that you might have where you say to yourself, if only I could, if only we could. How would you finish that sentence?
If only we could accept that we are different, yet equal. We are different, and yet equal in our diversity.
So I'm going to rephrase the question because I put it ambiguously. Do you ever have a moment where you say, if only we had the power to? That's what I'm asking. What would that be?
As the society in general?
No, your institution. Or the society in general. Feel free to answer both.
Okay. If only we had more of the power to
I'm happy to come back to you. Do you want to
to litigate more, maybe, and take more of this kind of incidents and cases that are important for us to task. And
relevant financial.
Minister Taylor, can I ask you the same question? Only we have the power to. You can rephrase it if you like. We're getting closer, but perhaps we might not be there.
Yeah, that's a hard one. The reason I was thinking was because I'm professor recently. Last week, my friends and I, after watching that video of the lady who said that she was to run whatever, we were like, you know what? We had the power to rule in this country. We would say zero tolerance to racism and racism. Zero tolerance. And very much, if somebody is, feels like they don't want to live with black people in South Africa, or they're calling people monkeys, we would just very kindly go with the truck and take people to their house and say, we are now having to move out of the country. Whether you like it or not, very unviolently, we talk people, because until there is much more harsher lives when it comes to dealing with racism on that kind of level in South Africa, we are constantly, every single group going to wake up to new Philistines and new Martinez, or whatever the guy's name was. And it's constantly going to shock us and distract us and keep us from doing the work that we're supposed to do. We all of us need to have a zero tolerance. And this is just in answer to your question. You mentioned it as a joke, but I think that it would work. We've had a system where we said, we are going to put you in jail, or actually, no, the jails are too good, we're dealing with other problems. Please kindly revoke your, we're going to revoke your citizenship and goodbye to you, and we'll see you. So we will never see you again. I would personally want to, spearhead that rule and good law.
I would imagine you get a lot of support and approval for it. The difficulty you might have, or the partiality of that, is you would get the penny sparrows, but you wouldn't necessarily get the people who don't say anything. But sorry, just to finish the question, you wouldn't necessarily be able to affect institutional change. I'm not saying it's either or, but if you wanted to change, for example, the way banks lend money, the way decisions are made about the proportion of profit that gets reinvested in this country, those kinds of things as well. Do you have if I had the power to on that, I'm not saying it's either or, don't get me wrong.
Yes, if I was also think about that. The thing we need to understand about racism and patriarchy and all these other isms is that they all existed to uphold capitalism. So it's not that people just woke up one day and they said we're going to kill black people, all these things, and we're going to shame women on these things. It all happened very systematically to ensure that money comes out at the end of the system, at the end of this machine. So if we change, we can't change racism and say things must, money must be redistributed without changing the way we think about how we make money and the role and function of money in our society. So we have to overhaul the whole thing. We have to think about how, if we don't want capitalism because it's slavery and colonialism and all these things, what do we want? And I think we're so at the beginning of the solution, we're at the bottom of the solution ladder. We haven't figured out that actually at the top of this thing is capitalism. That's what keeps people racist, because financially it benefits them to live in taxpayers and to their places. Why would anyone want to throw that away? So it's a matter of looking at capitalism, and I don't know how we're going to undo it. My writing focuses on the symptoms of capitalism, not necessarily the source itself. I'm not educated enough to say, okay, if you don't want capitalism, do you want socialism? I'm not really sure if socialism will work in a place like South Africa. Right now, I'm so exhausted thinking about these things. I'm at the point where that what is the most irritating problem? It's that one, okay, cool. Here's a solution for that.
Great. If we had the power to, you would or I would. What are you going to do?
I'm gonna abuse this and just also answer her question in a sense, because I've written stuff down and everyone always stuff. But to answer your question, first thing, two things. I would tear down the white cocoon. I think that too many white people can go about their comfortable lives without ever caring about a single black person in this country.
How would you tear it down?
We need to. I need to figure that out, but I'm not saying that. But I think what you need to do is to make people in South Africa, white people in South Africa, have black people in South Africa matter to them as much as black people matter to white people in this country. One. Two, I'd also try and find a way to I've always said to my wife that the only way I want her to stay with me is if she's able to leave, because I know that she's choosing to stay. And I want Black South Africans to choose to stay with white people. Whereas right now, it's almost as if we can't stay, we can't leave white people. To answer your question, I've got like a 4-step story. It's very broad, and I'm hoping someone will give me lots of money to do this one day, or that I'll generate the money myself in an ideal world. But the first step is to understand the exact architecture of the structure that you're trying to tear down. Right? So I would want to understand the exact architecture of apartheid, and I'm trying to do now with the resources that I have and reading what's available. But I think more people who are involved in creating what is apartheid need to come forward with what it was that went into it. Unfortunately, they're unlikely to. But what were the details, right? So legislative, spatial development, supremacy, cultural, economic, education. So like as far down the detail chain as building a beer hall at the entrance of every township. That's what I want to understand. I want to know exactly what I'm trying to pull apart. That's the first step for me. The second step is creating a clear picture of what we want to build, right? So again, you need a blueprint in order for you to build a house. So what does that blueprint look like in South Africa? That's the second step. The third step is understanding how to build that house. So what resources are required in order to build it, the time required, the people, institutions, materials, all of that stuff. That will be step number 3. And then step number 4 is simply iterate and correct. I don't think that you're going to get it right the first time. I think that you're going to have, like a computer program, run it, see if it works, fix what needs to be fixed, the bugs, and then run it again and so on. That's mine.
Thanks. We're at the end of our time, but not until we've heard from Taban. If I really had the power, I would do what?
I'll put the inverse of that, John, by saying that I have the power because I have the will.
Yes.
So I believe that all that we need now is the will. Just to catch some of the issues that you might from I think in terms of intervention strategies, we are at a point where, as a country, we have painted this ideal society that we want, that we are all aspiring for. And we have captured it simply in when we have fully entrenched it in our own institution, that we want to racial and society. That to me indicates that already we have a vision. But what is now lacking is the way to put that vision to material reality. And even begin to paint the picture of what is this non-racial society, what is this non-sexist society that we're talking about. So I think to me it starts there. We have a vision, it is in place. Maybe it has not been promulgated to the all and sundry that it becomes a embraced, ideal kind of society. Maybe we have lacked as a country to share that vision. Obviously, there are different interpretations and definitions of how people, look at this, ideal, non-racial society. We can talk and share more about what is our interpretation of that. That's what the vision stands for. That's what the vision is, where we get to getting better understanding of what is it that we have tried for, which I think has been an oversight on the part of those that John would say with power, those who have power. But as South African citizens, we do have. The other part that I want to move to the is we have to introduce dialogic engagement such as this one. It also emanates from these kinds of settings and forums where we begin to debate and address the very same discomforting, most difficult conversations that we get to have a better understanding of the kinds of complexities we are confronted with until we talk about these issues in very candid ways such as this one, in dialogic forms. Another one one would be to introduce also liberating pedagogies, not only in the classroom settings, in our homes, in our families, churches, in our movements, civil society movements, so that we can begin to deconstruct the very same concepts that we are dealing with, such as race, for example. So understanding these concepts such as race, because we don't have the same understanding, and how racism manifests itself, etc., etc. Also, we have to also understand that there is potential of changing society by using processes, media, all its various forms, film, press, etc., television, and begin to utilize them to bring the kinds of liberating educations that changes society, contrary to what we have in the Pacific, because we don't have that in internet for liberating ways. And also, lastly, we have to also interrogate. We always talk about this with the compromise, but we have to interrogate what we mean by that when we say that we have to decenter. No, there needs to be the decentering of life, where one needs to acknowledge the positionalities that we occupy, what it means to be oppressed. We have to, we can't be like that, and we have to, deconstruct and at the same time reconstruct this, so that we can head towards the kind of ideal society that we all envisage. But if we leave certain issues unattended to, then it does not necessarily take us to.
Okay, unfortunately, we've run out of time. So,
Oh, no, sorry. I
Okay.
missed it. Okay, so regarding what I'm doing on an everyday basis, to kind of respond to these issues in my work, there's a few things that I'm doing. But at the end, I kind of end with the one thing that on the book, the point that I kind of driving home all day. I'll drive it again at the end. So a few of my friends and I started a company called Feminist Stockhouse, which is what the name was saying, we are a group of feminists, and we started a stockhouse where we save money for and each other as friends, but also an organization that could exist as a space for Black women to come together to discuss things that are important to them on a regular basis. Let's create content around that on social media and stories, so that there was a repository of knowledge, of culture, of the kind of things that we're interested in for people who aren't interested to come and research. We came together because of the issue of hair. We all met at a hair panel, which is kind of good. Hair panels have kind of been popping up around the world, aided by the internet, where Black women are coming together to talk about issues of beauty and self-care, not just beauty, but beauty, which is a highly political subject, because racism for a lot of us plays out on how we treat our body. So we came together because of hair, because hair is a subject that helped us have a conversation about racism and race and identity. We also questioned, why do we do the things that we do to our hair? Like, why do we stretch it with relaxers that are dangerous for little children? Why do we put on the hair of other races and then try to be pretty? What is that about? Where did that come from? What's the historical context of that? And why do we put on skin lighters that have illegal substances where we are trying to lighten our skin? What is that about? It started with a conversation months ago where we wanted to feel better questions like that. So we started as a group of friends and we had monthly meetings and we used to invite people around to celebrate Black women only. We made this space only for Black women. And the reason we did this was because we did not want our brothers coming in and saying, yeah, but you know, all the, we know that men are sitting there treat you badly, but we're nice to you, we're not so bad to you. And we didn't want white people coming and say, yeah, we know other white people are racist, but I'm nice to you. Because we did at the beginning, and we found that that's kind of derailed us because the few white people in the two men that would come would somehow make it about them, and then it seems to become about us, and then we'd be holding their hand, holding their hand, saying, oh no, you're nice to you. So we wanted to create a safe space for Black women to come together uninterrupted, to just come and talk about our things, to cry, to laugh, we watch films together, we very much talk about practically also how to look after our hair, because people don't just put on these relaxing because they hate themselves. There's many reasons why people do it, but one of the main reasons is that we are taught how to look after our hair as Black women from when we're children. We grow up having it normal to put artificial sodium hydroxide and all those things in our hair to look prettier, to make it manageable and easier. So we wanted Black women to come together to learn how to look after their hair in its natural state as it grows out of their hair. What kind of oils can we put in it to make it nicely to comb? How to look pretty with an afro, which some people call wild, etc., etc. So we started the organization about a year ago, and we've had a really nice turnout at each event, and it shows us just how many Black women want to talk about these things. We are a middle class organization, because there's also a space for, there's also that's happened in the last 20 years in South Africa. There is a new Black Middle Class that's formed, and so Black Middle Class have, in many ways, we are also repeating the same thing, making the same mistake that white middle class has made for all other Black people. So we're dealing with issues of class, we're dealing with issues of race, as well as most importantly, gender, which is the other side of this race thing too. I'm the only woman on this panel, and so I have patriarchy to deal with. On top of having to try to end racism in my life, I also have patriarchy to end, as well as the men. But unfortunately, it's become a world problem. Just like racism has become a Black people's problem, patriarchy has become a women's problem, where we are oppressed by men on a daily basis in male areas in South Africa, and we are really the victims of the one that is going to come up with solutions. I always make kind of a class analogy between racism, patriarchy, and the victims and the oppressors. It's like asking women to not be raped, instead of asking rapists to stop raping. So people who are racially oppressed, the people who are oppressed under the agenda are similar to rapists. And they're the ones that we just like, hey, you know what, we need to stop raping. Actually, we can't ask women to put on long dresses or kids to not be children or play around in the way kids do. You can give as many warnings as you can to victims. But until the person who's perpetrating the crime decides that they want to stop the crime, they won't stop the crime. So feminism is one thing that I do. Secondly, I'm making a documentary about hair, about the relationship between hair, Black identity, gender, and post-apartheid life in South Africa. And the aim of it is to try and have people who might not be thinking about these things, which are most people in South Africa, think about how these things affect us on a daily basis. And I just want to ensure that when a Black woman watches it, they see how close this thing is. That racism attacks your mirror too, and made you look like it made you think that you don't look wrong. It made you think that you look there's something wrong with you, that you have to change your hair in order to be pretty or successful or anything that's positive. That film has been 2 years in the making. I'm hoping to release it next year. And then the third thing that I do is I'm the art editor of the London Guardian. I wasn't in it for very long. I've only been there for 4 months. And it was a difficult decision to make because it was freelance, people able to do many different things. And now I am kind of working from within an institution, and I have to employ the rules and the way that institution works in the kind of things that I'm trying to say. So I have to vary myself and the way that I think to do things with that. And I say yes to it because it's a good opportunity to try and have these conversations using art, using beautiful writing, using narrative, using stories to ensure that the Black people that are reading it are also thinking about in a way that's going to help them individually decide, okay, what can I do about this benefit, which is also writing. And then, yeah, the point that I would drive home, I haven't found a solution like this in South Africa. We don't have a solution like this. These conversations are only beginning. And again, we can write a logic with a whole bunch of different solutions to things. But until white South Africans, just now we didn't talk about this, there's other problems too. But until white South Africans decide that we actually want to stop this thing collectively, white people have been extremely industrious and smart in ensuring, in building things that benefit them. There's no reason why this can't be another thing to add. If people get together, you know what, we're really getting tired of things, let's do something about it. If people were tired of Zuma and 2 hours later, hold banner and say, they can come together with the same with the same kind of drive to end a problem that is a contested. But until that problem is a contested, it's not going to stop. People need to decide that this is a problem for us too, and we're going to put our cash behind it, most importantly. It's not enough to just put your intentions and your feelings and your emotions. Put money behind it. If you want to stop the racism, build a whole institution of racism. Invite all the researchers, do whatever you can, create a new language, create a new way to deal with this thing. But until that happens, black people will be dealing with this thing on their own.
Okay. We've come to the end. Unfortunately, I know that a lot of people have things to say and there'll be an opportunity over lunch to talk. Can I ask everybody in the audience to give our terrific panel a round of applause? And can I ask our panel, even though there's only 5 of us, to give the audience a round of applause because they played a big part. Thank you very much. Back to Heidi.
Hey.
Yeah. Thanks very much. And just to say thanks to everybody at the end there, kind of evening out the gender kind of imbalance. I think you kind of did your work for you and Zetu at the end. Thank you very much for the panel. And John, I think it's been a very thought-provoking discussion. I'm going to hand you over briefly now to our CEO, Prof. Crane Salim, who's going to make a couple of closing comments.
Thanks very much, Heidi. So just a couple of comments, colleagues. And first of all, my great appreciation to the panel for bringing to us, I think, both a little bit of urgency and also quite a deep sense of both what the challenge and the problem is, and also what it is that we can be doing. So let me just make one big remark, and I hope that this is useful. So the extraordinary thing about where the world is that we have in many parts of the world, and it's not just South Africa, it's not just South Africa with this constitution, but in many parts of the world, we now have an incredible sense of rights. And that sense of rights is one which has pushed the boundaries of what our humanness might be in ways that are quite extraordinary. You have even now, in a country like Spain, which lost last night, you have a real discussion going on about the difference between us and our primate brothers and sisters. It's quite an extraordinary conversation. It's raising this question of what our biological makeup is in relation to our primate brothers and sisters that pushes the boundaries of this discussion in ways that are absolutely at the edge. So, talking about monkeys, the way in which we've been, in a sense, duped in that particular discussion is to think that we're better than monkeys. And there are real ethical issues that I think we're having to confront. And so you have many constitutions around the world where this issue of what our rights are, where this discussion has been pushed to the absolute limits, further even than we are. And yet, we have, so let me just make it an in-between point. And what this has done, what this pushing of this question of rights has done, is to make the world a much better place for everybody than it was even 20 years ago. And that's an absolute fact. You can see it in people's standards of living around the world. And this is what this man, Thomas Piketty, has been able to show, is to show that in the last 20 years, living standards have risen everywhere in the world. And so the world is a better place than it had been before. And so the point to make about this is that it's inaccurate, it's incorrect to simply say that things are exactly as they were before in the past. It's just empirically not true and not correct. And yet, and this is the major point that I'd like to insert into this conversation. The way in which power works, the way in which power through the systems that exist in these different spaces in which we find ourselves, power in major institutions that we are parts of in the country, power in the minor institutions, if you like, just the clubs that we go to, the associations that we have, empowering those intermediate institutions of our religious organizations, our families, and so on. The way in which the power operates in those kinds of spaces at the moment is not the same, is not yet in alignment with what the law is asking of us. We are still able in our everyday lives to put each other down in the most incredible kinds of ways, even in our families. Even when we relate to each other as parents and children. We have power operating in the most complex kinds of ways. And this is the difficult thing, which a whole lot of the discussion needs to come to terms with. That none of us is without power. All of us has power of one kind or another at every single moment in our lives. This is what Divine French is trying to say. You are never without the ability to be able to hurt other people in one kind of way or another, even if you have a black skin. And it's an extraordinary thing to come to terms with. Because when you don't have that kind of awareness, you can operate as if you are either a victim or a perpetrator. But you're in that kind of complexity. There are, however, big things that we have to attend to, big forms of power. And these big forms of power, is what this decolonization experience moment is all about. It's about color, but it's also about all of those other big forms of power which operate in and outside of us all the time, which we are being asked to attend to. So bringing in a socialist system is going to bring its own also other kinds of difficulties which we need to be aware of. It's this total awareness of how power operates in and around you all the time. A total awareness, so that you can engage with it at all of its levels of complexity. This is why I really appreciate the kind of conclusion with which this session has ended, because the perplexing thing is that we have moved in terms of where the law and the legal systems are in the world, but we haven't moved sufficiently in terms of how we carry and behave ourselves as human beings. And how we do that is this amazing question, which I'd like to say to all of us colleagues, is what we need to be thinking of leaving here this moment.
because it leaves, and it's what John was saying, it leaves us with this big difference between just feeling guilty but understanding what our responsibilities are. Understanding what your responsibility is as a human being, and having unconditional sense of your entitlement to being a human being is what that responsibility is. It's a responsibility to yourself. It's a responsibility to also what you would like to report to another person. If you are prepared, if you have a particular understanding of what unconditionally you must have, you must understand that the next person, whoever that person is, young, old, ugly, as we come to think of each other. Tall, big, petty speaking, people who are bearers of HIV/AIDS, all of these things. How we think of each other is this really important issue which I think we are being asked to take away here and to think about. So what are we going to do going forward? I hope that we are going to be able to find ways of taking this conversation, this discussion forward. And we have ideas. Heidi will come and talk. Ladies, excuse me, Heidi, I really struggle. This is the way I've been socialized. I've been socialized into Heidi. And that's how you have to learn things slowly, please. You have to learn them repeated, not just once, repeated. So how we go forward, I'm going to ask Heidi to help us. Thanks very much. In conclusion, say a very big thank you to John, the only white person, for having anchored this particular session into all the rest of you, my brothers and sisters.
Thanks very much, Craig. I had a call the other day about somebody asking me to do something at Unisa, and they're having a conversation on the South African psyche in these particular times. And she said, well, we're actually looking for black persons. I said, my name is Heidi, said Hayley. My surname is Van Rooyen. I'm colored. I don't look like one. I don't sound like one, but if you have me, I'll feel kind of. So I think that's kind of, I think for me, that's been an overwhelming sense today. I think, Craig, you touched on the kind of the complexity of this conversation, this discussion. I want to particularly thank the panel and John for, I think, pushing further some of those thoughts and issues that have emerged throughout the series of discussions. I want to say, just conclude in two ways. One, to say something very briefly about where we're going to go with all of this as the HSRC, and then just to end with a few words of thanks. The dialogues have been fascinating for us as the HSRC. I think both individually and as an organization. We'll do some thinking and reflecting on this process once these have been concluded. And we'll follow up on a few thoughts that we've been having as these dialogues have been unraveling. I think one of the things we want to be doing more is a comment that came from the panel, is to look at how we take these dialogues into different kinds of spaces. We're very aware of the privilege we carry, the kinds of voices that we have, all of us here in this particular space, and are keen to look at how we can take these conversations into at that community level. So we'll do that, I think, wisely post-elections in August and not before. We want to be thinking a bit more about what questions this has opened up for us as a kind of a research organization. So there's some thoughts about bringing together a group of people who are working in that space, scholars who are working in the space of race, to begin to think about and helping us set what might be an agenda or a set of questions that we'd like to answer. And I think already some of those are emerging for us. A set of issues about what we do know from these conversations, from listening to people and the work that they're doing, but also deepening some of the work that we are doing in the HSRC on this particular topic. We have a really wonderful survey called SASAS, the South African Social Attitude Survey, which records racial attitudes in South Africa through exploration of issues of racial identification, prejudice, experiences of racism, threats, and so on and so on. We really want to be kind of doing more about deepening that work, deepening our thinking about the issues that are emerging from that, complementing that with much more qualitative inquiry that really helps us to kind of explore the ways in which race permeates all elements of social life, whether that's at school, at work, in our families, and in public spaces. So we really want to deepen our understanding And we really also want to be thinking about interventions much more. So it's not just being about understanding, it's really about thinking about what interventions work. And I think our panel today has been really good about talking about a range of interventions along all of those levels, at the individual level, family level, school level, broader kind of societal and structural level and policy level. And so we wanted to be thinking a bit more across all of those strata, how we could possibly be thinking about intervening. But just to say a couple of words in conclusion, this has been a cross-program effort, and I think it's been a real pleasure to work with my colleagues from programs like IESA, Democracy, Governance and Social Development, and Human Social Development, which is a program I'm part of. It's been a real pleasure to do this, and I think what it's really brought home for me is that issues of race and racism, as issues of gender, are not ones that belong to only some of us. I think it's really forced us to put our heads together and our collective skills together in putting this dialogue together. So to say a huge thank you to all of my colleagues who worked with me on this, our colleagues from communications, the Office of the CEO and the CEO himself, who really supported our initiative in getting this done. So thank you to everyone. It really has been a pleasure, and I think it kind of positions us well in thinking about what might be some of the next steps. Just to say, lunch is served. If you go out the door to your right and you make another right, somewhere around there you should smell something that should be speaking to your stomach. So thank you very much, Port Elizabeth. Thank you for turning out. The weather today was horrible yesterday when I arrived, in the cold and the wind and the rain, but today you did better. The blue skies are welcome and appreciated. Thank you once again to our panel. We really do appreciate it. John, we really do appreciate your skill and the way in which you held this conversation today. Thank you all, and safe travels to all.
Coming.